But you were 8 years into the show, right, when you got fired?
That's right,
And
yeah.
what was the straw that broke the camel's back?
I just think it came down to enough was enough. I think I can't really say because we had so many fights before where it wasn't an official firing, but I was asked to leave a few times. But I think it just came down to it.
American Chopper was pure television gold. Week after week, the world watched raw talent collide with roaring engines. To the fans, it was entertaining, addictive, and larger than life. However, behind the scenes, there was another story unfolding, one that wasn't edited, scripted, or staged. How did a dream between a father and son turn into a battle neither of them was truly prepared for? Why did Paul Sr. sue his own son for millions of dollars? And what exactly made them go almost a decade without speaking to each other? You'd be shocked to find out the real truth about this family and the heartbreaking scars that will follow them for the rest of their lives. The rise of American Chopper. When American Chopper first hit television screens in 2003, it looked like a dream come true. It was meant to be all about a family business, building custom bikes, turning wrenches, and chasing success together. However, this show turned out to be way more than the Teutul family had bargained for. What started as a show about craftsmanship and family pride slowly turned into something much more complicated and painful that no one saw coming. But long before the world ever heard the sound of their custom-built chopper roaring out of a small garage in upstate New York, for the Teutul family, it was all about a father who loved motorcycles and a son who grew up learning how to build them with his bare hands. Orange County Choppers didn't start out as some massive brand. It actually started as a small, family-run shop, and at the heart of it was a man named Paul Teutul Sr., who had spent decades working with steel and metal. He was a welder, a fabricator, and someone who had put in the hard labor, day in and day out, running a steel business called Orange County Iron Works. He built railings, beams, and other heavy-duty structures, and his world was one of fire, sparks, and sweat. But deep down, Paul always had a passion for motorcycles. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a part of who he was. He'd been riding bikes for years, and he'd always admired the beauty, craftsmanship, and attitude of custom choppers. So, around 1999, he decided to do something crazy. He took a risk, and with the help of his sons, he opened a small custom motorcycle shop that he named Orange County Choppers. At first, it was just a side project, something they did for fun. But then, it quickly became something more. And this is where Paul Jr. comes into the picture in a big way. From the time he was a kid, he grew up surrounded by metal. He had worked at his father's ironworks business for years, learning how to weld, cut, and shape steel. He wasn't just an assistant anymore. He was actually really good at the job. And what made him different was the fact that he didn't just see the mechanical side of things. He had a creative eye. While most people saw pipes and parts, Paul Jr. saw possibilities. He could imagine how a bike would flow, how it would stand out, and even how it could tell a story. That design instinct would become his signature, and the one thing that would eventually set Orange County Choppers apart from all the other bike shops in the country. In the early days, it was just father and son and a small team of mechanics trying to make ends meet. They worked in a modest garage, sometimes late into the night, building bikes from scratch, customizing parts, and experimenting with wild ideas. But soon enough, word started to spread. People noticed their work, and before long, they went from being just another motorcycle shop to building a name for themselves. But that was only the beginning, and their big break was just around the corner. Their story truly changed when the Discovery Channel began looking to create a reality show about custom motorcycle builders. They wanted drama, creativity, and real personalities. And so, when they found the Teutuls, they hit the jackpot. There was Paul Sr. with his no-nonsense, always, barking orders. And then there was Paul Jr., who was laid back, artistic, and constantly butting heads with his dad. Their personalities, mixed with the incredible bikes they were building, were TV gold. In 2003, American Chopper hit the airwaves, and almost overnight, everything changed for the Teutuls. The show exploded in popularity. People couldn't get enough of it. It wasn't just about motorcycles. It was about family, conflict, creativity, and passion. Viewers tuned in not just to see the bikes, but to watch the drama unfold between father and son, the tension in the workshop, and the chaos of looming deadlines. And at the center of it all were the beautiful, powerful, one-of-a-kind custom motorcycles that pushed the limits of design and craftsmanship. Some of the bikes they built became instantly iconic. There was the Fire Bike, a deeply emotional tribute to the firefighters who lost their lives in the 9/11 attacks. That build wasn't just a bike. It was a work of art and a memorial on two wheels that ended up touching people far beyond the motorcycle world. Then there was the Black Widow bike, known for its sleek, spider-like design, and the Comanche bike, which looked like it came straight off a futuristic battlefield. Each motorcycle project became more ambitious than the last, and fans and motorcycle enthusiasts were completely hooked. The shop grew, and so did the brand. Orange County Choppers became a household name, and they went from spending all their time in the garage to doing press tours, appearing on talk shows, partnering with corporate sponsors, and building bikes for celebrities, companies, and even the military. But even with all that success, the real magic and the heart of the whole operation was always Paul Jr.'s design talent, while others in the industry were focusing on raw power or sticking to traditional styles. Paul Jr. was redefining what a custom bike could look like. He brought intense creativity and imagination into the process. He wasn't afraid to try new shapes, experiment with unusual themes, or add personal stories into every curve and paint job. His designs were bold and different, and you could always tell when a bike had his touch on it. In fact, many bikers claimed that he made bikes that looked like they belonged in museums but still rode like a dream. The fans definitely noticed, and they respected his vision. They admired how he could take a simple idea and turn it into a rolling piece of art, and his ability to sketch out a concept and then bring it to life in steel and chrome gave the shop an edge that no other shop had at the time. But it wasn't long before the very thing that changed their lives began to feel like it was ruining it. While the show brought them fame and fortune, it also put a microscope on their lives, and that pressure, the spotlight, the constant filming, and the growing stress of running a business that had suddenly become global started to wear them down. For Paul Jr., he became stuck between trying to be a loyal son and trying to be a creative leader in his own right. And as the cameras kept rolling and the stakes kept getting higher, the tension inside the Orange County Choppers workshop slowly started to boil. What had started as a fun family project was now a high-pressure machine with deadlines, expectations, and egos all clashing in the same room. And unfortunately, eventually, something had to give. And this was where things began to get heartbreaking. The family feud that shook the show. As American Chopper climbed the ranks of television fame, what happened behind the scenes? Between Paul Sr. and his son was anything but scripted. What had started as a dream between a father and son quickly turned into one of the most explosive and painful family dramas ever seen. On reality television, and it left a mark on both their lives and altered their relationship, as well as the legacy of Orange County Choppers forever. From the beginning, they were both very different men. Paul Sr. was the old-school, no-nonsense guy who wanted everything done his way. He had built his life from nothing and believed in discipline, hard work, showing up on time, and respecting authority. He had a sharp tone, a quick temper, and a belief that if something wasn't done his way, it wasn't worth doing at all. His son, On, the other hand, was more relaxed, creative, and artistic, and had a natural eye for design. He was gifted at seeing the bigger picture and at turning ideas into stunning custom motorcycles. But he definitely wasn't great at following rules, especially his father's. At first, that dynamic worked. They had the perfect balance of discipline and creativity, and this gave their shop its edge. But as the cameras kept rolling and the audience grew, the cracks in their relationship started to show. Every episode seemed to bring a new shouting match. They argued about designs, deadlines, responsibilities, and even things as small as showing up on time. But these weren't just normal disagreements. They were loud, aggressive, and seemed deeply personal. It got so bad that the tension in the shop became so regular, fans almost expected an argument in every episode. What made it worse was the fact that these fights weren't just about bikes. They were about deeper and more complicated issues like identity, power, and respect. Paul Sr. had built Orange County Choppers from the ground up. To him, this was his shop, and his rules had to apply. However, Paul Jr. had gone from being a regular employee to becoming the star of the workshop. His bike designs were what made the show stand out. People tuned in to see what he would come up with next. Fans admired him, and many started seeing him as the real genius behind the workshop's success. And unfortunately, the constant comparisons between father and son only added fuel to the fire. And behind the scenes, things got even more complicated. As in 2007, Paul Jr. owned 20% of Orange County Choppers shares. But this wasn't just a symbolic share. It actually gave him some real power when it came to how the business was run. And with power came conflict and constant clashes. The two men clashed over every decision, both big and small. Paul Sr. believed his son was being disrespectful and irresponsible, while Paul Jr., on the other hand, believed his father was trying to control everything and wasn't giving him the credit he deserved. And slowly, their relationship was caught in a battle for control, not just over the shop, but over the direction of their entire brand. As time went on, Paul Sr.'s temper became even harder to manage. It wasn't about his son alone anymore. Even crew members and employees at the shop often found themselves in the center of the conflicts. It got so bad that the mood in the garage became increasingly volatile. A bad morning or a missed deadline could turn into a full-blown screaming match. No one knew what version of Paul Sr. they'd get on any given day. And as the time went on, Paul Jr. began growing tired. The constant yelling, the power struggles, and even the stress of filming were starting to wear him down. Then, in 2008, a major blow-up pushed their relationship to the breaking point. It started out as the usual disagreement that could have died down, but this time around, it didn't. Paul Sr., already fed up with what he saw as a lack of respect, snapped at his son like never before, and Paul Jr. responded with equal intensity. The cameras caught the whole thing. Voices were raised, accusations flew across the room, and tensions escalated to the point of physical outbursts. This wasn't just another argument. This time it was way too personal. Hurtful words were said, and Paul Sr., red with anger, told his son he was fired. And just like that, the team that had built Orange County Choppers from scratch was torn apart. The fallout was immediate and shocking. Fans of the show were stunned. For years, they had watched the two fight, but no one ever expected it to go this far. Viewers flooded online forums, debating whether this was truly the end of the show. Many were concerned about the future of the workshop, and customers had doubts about the future of the motorcycle designs. The brand had been built around the family dynamic of father and son, so what would happen now that it had imploded? The network behind American Chopper was also worried. The show's success depended heavily on both Teutul's being on the screen, and losing Paul Jr. was a huge risk. His designs were the reason many viewers watched the show in the first place. Paul Sr. may have been the backbone of the company, but Paul Jr. was definitely the face of the bikes. And without him, there was a possibility that the show could collapse. Amid mounting pressure from both the audience and the business side, Paul Jr. was eventually brought back, but this time not as an employee, but as a contractor. He wasn't technically part of the shop anymore. He was hired just to design and build bikes for the show. But even then, the tension didn't go away. Their interactions were still cold and awkward, and it was clear that they didn't trust each other. Soon enough, it became clear that the energy that had once driven Orange County Choppers workshop and the spark between father and son was gone. The damage had been done, and Paul Jr. no longer wanted to be under his father's thumb. His father also wasn't willing to give up control of his shop. And eventually, Paul Jr. walked away for good. His absence was felt immediately. The show continued, and the shop still built bikes. But the magic was gone. The creative genius that gave the company its edge wasn't there anymore, and the fans noticed. The show's ratings dipped, and soon enough, the show was canceled altogether. But Paul Jr. didn't walk away without a fight, and the conflict that would emerge after he left the show would become even more explosive than the reason he left in the first place. The post-show conflict. Leaving Orange County Choppers was supposed to be the start of something new for Paul Teutul Jr., but what followed was far from easy. When he stepped away from the family business and the show that made him famous, he found himself facing not just professional obstacles, but deeply personal battles that tested his spirit and his passion for building bikes. The split between father and son wasn't just a temporary disagreement. It became a legal war that shook the very foundation of the company they built together. After Paul Jr. left Orange County Choppers in 2008, the relationship between him and his father was so strained that Paul Sr. actually dragged his son to court, turning their family fight into a messy court case that lasted for years and made headlines in the custom bike world. The big issue was about ownership. Paul Sr. wanted to forcefully buy out his son's 20% share of the company and completely kick him out so he could be in total control of the company and wouldn't have to share power with his son anymore. The lawsuit was painful because it wasn't just business. It was deeply personal, and both sides kept blaming each other for hurting the company and acting unfairly. A big fight was over how much Paul Jr.'s 20% share was really worth. The company had gotten really popular, mostly thanks to the TV show and all the amazing bikes they built, so that stake was valuable. But Paul Sr.'s team argued it wasn't worth that much because the family drama had hurt the business. And Paul Jr. wouldn't budge because he wanted a fair price that matched all the years of effort and dedication he had put into the company. People all over were watching this legal drama unfold, following updates on social media and in interviews. What used to be family arguments in the garage were now court battles for everyone to see. This made things stressful for workers and customers and left everyone wondering if Orange County choppers could survive. The court ultimately ruled in favor of Paul Jr., allowing him to keep his 20% stake in Orange County choppers. This was a very big win because it meant he retained legal ownership and couldn't be completely pushed out. However, the victory came with the reality that the personal and professional damage to their relationship and the business had been done. Even though Paul Jr. maintained his ownership, the strained father-son relationship meant that working together again in a traditional way was almost impossible. The legal battle had settled the business side, but left deep scars on the family. As if that wasn't hard enough, Paul Jr. faced another major obstacle. During the legal battle, he was hit with a one-year non-compete clause. This meant that for an entire year after leaving his father's workshop, he was legally barred from building motorcycles or doing anything that could compete with his former company. For a man whose life and identity were so tied to custom bike building, this was a harsh sentence that left him in a tough spot. However, instead of sitting still, he turned to other design projects that allowed him to keep working with his hands and imagination, even if it wasn't motorcycles. He took on other design projects that helped show the world that his creativity was not limited to bikes alone. That year-long enforced silence on motorcycles was painful, but it also gave him the space to think about his own identity outside of his father's shadow. It was a time of soul-searching and regrouping. Finally, in April 2010, the non-compete clause expired, and Paul Jr. was free to ride again on his own terms. He launched Paul Jr. Designs, a new company based in Montgomery, New York. This was more than just a business move. It was his way of finally stepping out on his own and carving a new path separate from his father's legacy. With this new company, he could fully express his creativity and vision. No longer confined by the strict control of his dad, he pushed boundaries with his designs, mixing innovation with bold artistic flair. And it didn't take long for his company to catch attention. The company began to attract high-profile clients, including celebrities and major brands who wanted those signature Paul Jr. touches on their custom motorcycles. But while he was building a fresh start for himself, the drama with his father was far from over. The rivalry between the two had become the centerpiece of a new television series called American Chopper, Senior versus Junior. The show aired in 2010 and brought viewers back inside the intense, often explosive relationship between father and son. This wasn't just a show about motorcycles anymore. It was a real-time drama about family, pride, and the struggle for independence. Fans watched every heated argument, every tense negotiation, and every moment, where the love and hate for each other collided in the garage. The show laid bare the very human sides of both father and son, as well as the passion, the pain, the ambition, and the bruised egos. Even though the rivalry was on full display, the show also revealed moments where both men seemed to want to find common ground. There were episodes where they tried to settle their differences and talk about what was best for their futures. Paul Sr., despite his fiery temper and stubborn pride, expressed a wish for healthy competition with his son, rather than ongoing conflict. But the wounds were still fresh, and healing was slow. Behind the cameras, things were complicated. The fans witnessed the drama, but what they didn't always see was the toll it took on everyone involved, including the employees who were caught in the middle, the customers who were worried about the future of the shop, and the strain on the entire family. The public feud made it harder for Paul Jr. to fully move on, but he was determined to prove that he could succeed on his own. Starting Paul Jr. Designs was a bold statement that took courage, especially after everything he had been through, even as he focused on growing his new company. The shadows of the past followed. But what happened between the father and son after the dust settled is something no one could have expected. Where the Teutul's stand today. When Paul Jr. walked away from Orange County Choppers, it wasn't just about quitting a job or leaving a TV show. He was stepping out of the shadow of a larger-than-life father, trying to find out who he really was without all the shouting, tension, and pressure that had built up over the years. And as hard as it was, that move turned out to be one of the most important decisions of his life. He finally had his chance to finally do things his way, without having to argue over every decision or fight to prove he was good enough. And he did just that. Around the same time he was building a new career, he also found love. He met Rachel Beaster, and they fell in love. In 2010, the two got married in a beautiful ceremony at Bonnet Island Estate in New Jersey. The wedding was elegant and full of joy, but someone was missing at the ceremony. Fans and the general public were once again shocked to find out that Paul Sr. didn't show up to his own son's wedding, despite the fact that he had been invited. For most people, a father missing their child's wedding would be unthinkable. But for Paul Jr., it was just one more painful reminder of how deep the divide had become. Even on one of the most important days of his life, the wounds between father and son were too raw to be healed by a single invitation. Still, Paul Jr. focused on his new life and family that he had started with the one person who meant everything to him. In 2015, Paul and Rachel welcomed their son, Hudson. And just like that, their lives changed. Becoming a father had a huge impact on him. It wasn't just about learning how to care for a baby or staying up all night with a crying child. He learned patience, sacrifice, and the quiet strength that comes with parenthood. Suddenly, he started to see things differently, including his own relationship with his dad. In an interview, he later confessed that after becoming a father, he began to truly understand just how much pressure his own father must have been under when running a business and raising a family at the same time. He didn't agree with how his father had handled everything, especially the anger and control issues, but he started to see where some of it might have come from, and it gave him a new level of empathy even if the pain from the past hadn't disappeared. Today, Paul Jr. continues to grow his brand, work on creative projects, and raise his son with the kind of love and balance he always wished he had. Even after all these years, with the cameras gone and the dust settled, one thing hasn't really changed, and it's the fact that Paul Jr. and Sr. are still not close. You would think that time might have healed some wounds, or that shared memories would have pulled them back together. But that hasn't happened. Instead, their relationship remains distant, tense, and, at times, completely silent. For fans who followed their story from the beginning, it's heartbreaking to see that a father and son who once built something great together now barely speak. They worked side by side for years, shared the spotlight, and created something the world admired. But behind the bikes and fame, there was always a deep, emotional gap between them. And today, that gap seems wider than ever. One of the saddest reminders of this broken bond is the holidays. Most families, no matter how messy things get, still find a way to come together for special occasions, like a Thanksgiving meal, a Christmas gathering, or even just a phone call on New Year's Eve. But that's not the case in the Teutul household. Paul Jr. has openly admitted that it's been over 15 years since he shared a holiday meal with his father. That's not just a long time. It's practically a lifetime when you think about how quickly the years fly by. And it's not just about father and son. Everyone in the family has felt the impact, and this long-standing feud has left the entire family feeling like they're walking on eggshells, unsure of which side to stand on or how to make peace. In 2020, fans held on to hope when Discovery announced a new special called American Chopper: The Last Ride. For a moment, it looked like things might finally turn around. The show brought the father and son back together, not just for a bike build, but for what seemed like a last-ditch effort to fix what had been broken for so long. The idea was simple: one final build, side by side, just like the old days. Could they put their differences aside, even just for a little while? Could the shared love for bikes and the respect they once had reignite something new between them? Well, sadly, the answer was no, because from the very beginning of the special, it was clear that old habits die hard. The tension was still there, hanging in the air like thick smoke. Of course, they were polite and even professional, but there was no warmth, laughter, or evidence of real healing. The emotional distance was just as obvious as it had been in the final seasons of the original show. By the time the special aired, many fans knew that this wasn't a reunion. It was just two people pretending to be okay. At the end of the day, the story of Paul Jr. and Sr. serves as a reminder that family isn't always easy, that success can't fix everything, and that some scars, no matter how deep, don't always heal the way we hope they will. Who do you think is at fault for the downfall of American Chopper? Tell us in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.